In this video, I want to talk to you about the power of your mind to help you create, and intentionally using your mind as a tool to create the things you want to experience in your life. And I want to share it through my journey. When I started this journey, I don't know why I was irrational enough to actually believe I could improve my life beyond what it was, but something in me said, you can move forward, you can get ahead. You can do different things, and I believed it. And I started reading books about this, and they talked about this process of using your mind, your imagination, to mentally rehearse what it is you wanted to experience. And so at the time, I was cleaning a bar, not the most glamorous job. I'd clean vomit and broken glass and clean toilets, and it was awful. And so my job wasn't necessarily my ideal job that I wanted to do. My car had the floorboard, I could see the road go by through the floor because it was so rusted out. And, financially, I wasn't making that much money. My relationships weren't the best. My health wasn't the best. And I looked at it and I said, well, I have this vision of what I think is possible in my world. And part of it was to try and fix my broken story. So the reason I say the very first of the laws of power is you got to change that story, because I didn't. I thought getting the stuff would fix my story. But I would do this visualization process. So I would wake up a lot of mornings, most mornings about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'd go sit out in this field, and I would envision the things that I wanted to experience. I could envision the car I wanted to have, and I could envision this house that I wanted to live in, and it would have this dirt driveway that came in under these trees, and it was going to have this outbuilding where I could park my toys, and it was going to have a place where I could meditate and do visualization without getting run off, because sometimes a farmer would come through his field that I was sitting in, and I'd have to lay down in the ditch and he'd drive by, and I'd sit back up and keep my visualization going. But I envisioned my business making a certain amount of money, and I wanted to be a public speaker. So I'd envision myself on stage, and I could see this light come into me, and I could share it with people. And that was a vision that I would have. Every morning I would practice this. And I remember I was mopping the floor on the dance floor of this bar one morning, and it was just me. And every morning I would be listening to these programs that reprogrammed my brain. I was listening to transformational information. I was filling myself with the things that I wanted to experience. And the guy on this program, he says, what is it you see yourself doing? What is it that speaks to you that you want to do? And I remember I paused there with that mop, and I looked around that empty bar. It was just me in the dark room. And I thought, I want to be a public speaker. I like telling stories. I like inspiring people. That's what I want to do. And then the little voice in my head, it was like, who do you think you are? Like, what are you going to talk to these people about? And I paused for a moment, and I thought about it, and I said, I'm going to tell them about cleaning this bar, which is what I do now when I'm on stage. It took another decade to get there as far as being able to tell some of those stories. But what happened is I started to do this process. And as I worked at it, and as I put the pieces in place, I remember this one day when I was walking through my yard, and I had forgotten about that visualization that I would do. And I looked around, and I lived in the house I'd envisioned. And they had the dirt driveway under the trees and the outbuilding and the place to meditate. And I looked in the driveway, and it was the very car that I had been envisioning. And then I had spoken in 4 cities that month, and we'd hit our financial goal that month. And there was all these different things that I had envisioned that I had actually experienced. And it was this incredible, whoa, I forgot. But what happened is when my concept of myself, my story of myself, and my vision had increased, and then I worked and I worked and I relentlessly worked, I eventually, through natural law of creation, experienced what I had been envisioning. And then something happened. Something shifted inside me when I got to where I was now making more money than most people that I knew. And there was a lot more success than I had ever had, and more than most people that I had ever known. And something shifted inside of me. And my inner dialogue kicked in. The broken story kicked in. That's why we have to transform the story. Otherwise, it'll cause us to sabotage everything. And my story kicked in, and it started to say, dude, you're full of it. If these people really knew about all your problems, because I was out of balance. I didn't know how to do it otherwise. I've told you some of these stories, and I'll tell you some more of these stories. And the inner dialogue started to kick in and say, if these people really knew you, they'd know you were a fraud. And all of a sudden, instead of every morning envisioning the things I wanted, and every night as I went to bed thinking about what I was creating in my life, I shifted into envisioning the worst possible way that I could collapse everything in detail every morning. And I'd feel the feelings of the fear and the anxiety, and I would think about, oh, what if I collapsed it this way and collapsed it that way? And I brought up the most embarrassing way that I could collapse things that I could think of in that space. And I would think about it every day. And at night when I go to bed, I'd think about it. And then all of a sudden, I started doing those things. And I started making those decisions in my business. I started crashing things and collapsing things until I got all the way down to where I had $200 left. And I remember this moment of realization. I had sold everything I owned. I sold the cars and the toys and the motorcycles, and I sold the house, and I moved into this little rental house that had, in the basement of the rental house, there were snake skins on the wall where the snakes would shed. I don't know when, I never saw the snakes, but there are these big long snake skins on the wall. And when I turned on the shower, the plumbing would pound, and my office was in the bathroom of the house, because it was the only room I could fit a desk in, and I'd have to tell my kids not to flush every time they came in when I was on calls. I had pushed everything down to that bottom place. And it was in that moment. And I was in this victim mode of like, why is God doing this to me? Or why do these people do this to me? Why did this happen to me? And it was in that mode that I realized I had taken the same steps to tear it down that I had taken to build it up. And in that moment, I shifted my thinking. And as irrational as it was to think that I could create something again, I caused myself to generate that imagination of saying, here's what I want to create in my life. And I started to practice this and practice that thought. And then I looked in the world and I started to do the natural law work. And the beauty of hitting the bottom was that my story about me had changed. And I got to this place of going, I accept me at the bottom. And I believe when we can accept ourselves at the bottom, then we can accept ourselves all the way up. And so as I started to do this, then I was able to create the things I wanted to create again. And this time, I'm creating them in a more balanced setting. My relationships are more authentic. My health, I focus on it more. My finances, it's easier work. It's work that inspires me and that I enjoy doing. And I'm creating that intentionally. My invitation for you is to take the tool of your mind and use it to create your life. Use it intentionally. Every morning, have the things you're focusing on that you want to create. Every night as you go to bed, practice the mental rehearsal. And then during the day, do the natural law work that it takes to turn your vision into something real in the world. And I believe no matter where you are on planet Earth, if you can create that vision in you, rooted in reality, and you're willing to pay the price to get it, you can eventually create it and turn it into something real. I've created a little cheat guide for you to help you start to map this out and learn how to reprogram your mind so that you can use it to create rather than tear you down. If this is something that's interesting to you, just click on the link on this page, click on the button, and I'll send you the information, and you can start today living these 7 irrefutable laws of power.